The impact has been really quite severe. The low-income segment and poor population have been particularly hard hit not only by the financial crisis, but by the sort of previous twin crises of the food and fuel crisis of the previous year. Food prices went up in every single country in the world in 2008, and this lower income segment of the population is still really reeling from those effects. And so we typically see that women and girls in a household are often those who give up their meals before other members of the household. It's typically girl children who are taken out of school if the school fees can't be paid, or in order to generate more income. Healthcare costs fall disproportionately more on the backs of poor women, and so if a woman has managed to put together a business and has started on an entrepreneurial way, she is much more likely to decapitalize that business in order to pay for those healthcare costs. And so we've seen not only poor women, but their businesses also quite hard hit during this current financial crisis. I think it's really important to remember with the Millennium Development Goals that while there are two goals which very explicitly refer to women, MDG 3 is explicitly in regard to empowerment of women and gender equality. There's a goal that refers to maternal health. All of the goals really do touch women's lives and can only be fully achieved if they do address certain gender aspects. And so while I think most people feel fairly confident that while there is a long way to go on many goals, the overarching goal of having the number of people living in poverty by 2015, when you start to drill down and look at the gender impacts of that, the news is a little bit less exciting. Women make up 70% of the people living in extreme poverty, and so that their presence amongst the very poor and in extreme poverty still is projected to continue. You're seeing in the realm of primary education, for example, some fairly good results have happened in making progress towards that MDG, but the gender equality still very much lacks. Girls are still not receiving access to primary education at quite the same rate that boy children are. I think we still have a long way to go. One thing that we at Women's World Banking are very excited about, though, is that, as we start to see more women in leadership positions at the national level and subnational level positions, there is a recognition that having a diversity of leadership at the table, having different faces making decisions, really can have an enormous impact on women's self-confidence and the programs that do get created to address women and girls' needs. We're so excited because we've become much more engaged in issues of women's leadership, particularly in the realm of microfinance, where we're working. You've seen many very, very impressive women leaders in the industry, but as microfinance has grown, you've seen a decrease in the number of women leaders, women board members, even women staff in microfinance. And so we're working very hard to redress some of that balance with some very specific training. So I think a goal that recognizes the importance of diversity in decision-making, diversity in policy-making is only a good thing for women. And if we're going to reach it, it's only going to be because there is, as I say, a more diverse set of people looking at these problems. I thought that was a very interesting question, given the origins of Women's World Banking. WWB was really sort of conceived at the first UN conference on human rights for women in 1976 in Mexico City. And there was a recognition by many of the conference participants that human rights were very important, but they would never be fully achievable unless there were economic rights, and that women did have some ability to be economically independent. And so while I don't necessarily think that a right to credit is a human right, the ability to have access to financial services both on the credit side as well as a safe place to save your money is enormously empowering and does create that human dignity and that ability to create your own future, your own business, to engage in work that is empowering both for men and for women. So I think it's an important piece of the puzzle as we look at the fuller picture of what human rights really entail. Well, the United States was fairly selective in the areas in which it was contributing. A lot of money over the last several years went into the goal around HIV/AIDS, but was, I don't think, particularly a player towards the achievement of many of the other goals. The EU as a body, I don't feel has been particularly strong, although you've seen many individual European nations really focusing their foreign assistance on specific MDG goals. We have seen, particularly after this last General Assembly last September, September '08, many of the Nordic countries, for example, very explicitly reorienting or strengthening their bilateral assistance around the MDG3, and really seeing that as a goal, as I said earlier, that requires a special attention so that the other goals can be more fully met.
And going back again to MDG3, where have we seen the most growth in that? Is it more in as far as women's gender equality? In women in government, what aspect do you think has shown most improvement?
Well, while it is certainly not my area of expertise, I understand there's been considerable progress in the area of women in representative government positions, and you are starting to see an increase in women's paid employment, although women represent something like 80% of the unpaid work around the world, so they are still much more representative in that sort of informal sector employment. But in the paid sector, there have been advances, although you still see enormous inequities in terms of pay, that women worldwide are paid a fraction, really, of what men are paid in that for similar work. So, it is, I really must say, it is a bit of a half full and half empty glass at this point. Women per se, I should know that number. I can't really say, but we really look at microfinance has reached 155 million borrowers, which actually is a stunningly low number when you think about the fact that microfinance has been around 30 odd years, and that it has received so much attention and has really captured people's imagination. But if you look at even the people living on $2 a day, and I tend to, and my organization tends to focus not on the poorest of the poor, but those who have made sort of the working poor or the entrepreneurial poor, who've made one step beyond that and have identified businesses that they might be able to go into. You're still talking about over 1 billion people that don't have access to finance. In sub-Saharan Africa, less than 10% of the population have access to any financial services at all. And I think, as an overarching statement, there has been the least progress on all of the goals, but certainly those pertaining to women in sub-Saharan Africa. I understand that that the number of people the number of people living in poverty has slipped back to the level of 1997 in sub-Saharan Africa as a result of the turmoil of this past year. So in regional terms, there are great disparities, and there may have even been a step backwards in some cases.